The Not-So-Dead. Faye's Story. Written by Isaiyan Morrison. With the expectation of Thanksgiving break moments away, Faye glanced up at the clock, hoping her math teacher wouldn't notice her impatience. The bell rang and a bustle of excitement followed. Students hurriedly stuffed their bags and jumped from their seats. Some chatted about their plans for the holidays, but not Faye. She avoided making eye contact and ducked her way out of the classroom, scurrying towards her locker. "Faye, could you stay back for a moment?" She paused in mid-step at her teacher's request as the other students filed by and rushed through the door. Now alone, she turned around slowly. Mr. Patterson leaned against his desk and folded his arms. "You've missed 3 assignments this week," he said to her. "Do you plan on turning them in anytime soon?" Eager to be released from the prison that disguised itself as a classroom, she nodded quickly. "I'm sorry, Mr. Patterson. There's a lot going on right now at home, and—" He held up his hand. "Just get those assignments to me. I expect them on my desk the first day back from break." Again, she nodded. "Will do." Half an hour later, she burst from the drawbridge of the school bus, fleeing the last fortification that held her back from her freedom. As she opened the front door, she heard a vacuum, signaling that her mother was on one of her cleaning sprees again. Her mother was one of those fastidious fanatics who felt the home had to look like something out of a magazine every time they had company. She was a tornado of activity, ruthlessly tearing through the dirt, grime, and disorganization left over from the family's everyday affairs. Faye snuck past her mother, careful not to be seen, lest she be recruited to join the domestic onslaught. She dumped her purple backpack on her bedroom floor, turned on her computer, and waited. Soon, she was connected and entered the world of Battlelands Brigade. She chose her regular character, Sylvina, the warrior elf. As uncomfortable and alien as she felt in the real world, she was contrastingly sharp, confident, and adept in the Battlelands. She joined forces with a wizard named Argyll and a sphinx named Ral Hassaf. Together they traversed the mythical land of Wananu, battling against the ghouls, demons, and trickster brownies sent to disrupt the peace of the land. Faye knew each of the other players by the sound of their voice, as they communicated on headsets, but she didn't know who they were. They had all agreed not to exchange personal information in case their paths crossed in the real world. Occasionally, Faye wondered about her online comrades, where they lived and what they looked like. The wizard always sounded like a young man, but the sphinx sounded like an older one. She reached the valley where an army from the underworld was rising, marching towards the quiet village she had just left, when her bedroom door swung open. "Hey, stranger," her sister Cammy greeted her. Her sister's tall, slender frame entered the room, wrapped in a baggy college hoodie and ripped jeans. Faye held up a finger to her, signaling that she needed a minute. "Hey, Argyll, I need you. There are unfriendlies impinging on Delexia." "I'm on it. I'm bringing a swirling storm." She heard his voice through her headset. Immediately, a dark cloud and tornado formed on Faye's screen. She watched the storm eat up the undead, gaining momentum and mass. Faye lowered her headset from her ears and smiled at her sister, while keeping one eye on the screen. "Still playing that stupid game?" Cammy teased. "Hey, it's a hobby," Faye lamely defended herself. "You know, people get paid to actually do this professionally." "Yeah, I'm sure." Cammy plopped herself down on Faye's bed. "So you're home until Monday, right?" Faye confirmed. "Yeah, but I have some plans to get together with my friends from high school. We're gonna go shopping and hang out." Disappointed, Faye's face fell. She hoped to hang out with her big sister, who was one of the few people she felt comfortable around. As they were only 2 years apart, they had always been very close growing up. "But I was thinking," Cammy continued, "that we could go out for pizza. Want to take a break from your land of nerd stuff to come grab a slice at Mr. G's?" Cammy was one of the few people who could draw her out of the Battlelands. "Sure." She quickly replaced her headset over her ears. "Argyll, Ral Hassaf, I have to go. It's a 6-to-1-2. Bye." Early on, they had developed a number code for when they had to log off the game, which allowed them to be nonspecific. 6 was for having to go immediately, 1 meant she would return to the game later, and 2 was for the number of hours she guessed it would be until she returned. Cammy watched Faye, smiling wryly. Wow, You are way into that game. You guys even have your own code? Course, Faye shrugged, smiling a little. Both sisters went downstairs to grab their shoes. Their mother relaxed on the couch with a glass of wine while watching TV. She heard their hurried steps. Where are you both off to? She asked. Their father came from the kitchen, dish rag in hand. Cammy, you just got home. You're not going out now, are you? He pushed his glasses, propped on the edge of his nose, back toward his face. Just taking Faye out to get some pizza. We won't be gone long, Cammy reassured him. Faye was thankful when they left the house. These were her favorite times, just hanging out with her sister, talking about nothing and everything. Faye rolled down the passenger side window to feel the cool nightfall breeze on her face. November was always the perfect month, weather-wise, in Austin. Not too hot, not too cold, and without all the humidity of the summer months. Cammy rambled on about everyone she met, partied with, and events she attended at college as Faye listened, visualizing, and wondering how much homework came with the college life. Sooner or later, her parents expected her to follow in her big sister's footsteps. They had everything planned out for her, including her major. They wanted her to be a doctor, but she couldn't stand the sight of blood. Instead, she dreamed of becoming a video game designer, or better yet, the CEO of her own gaming company. At Mr. G's, Cammy ordered a personal pizza with her favorite toppings, sausage and green peppers. Unsure of what she wanted, Faye ordered the same, but with extra onions and pineapple. They sat at a small table in the corner near the window and waited. So, how's school going? Cammy inquired, switching the focus of the conversation. I want to hear about your life. Any cute boys? Faye shrugged her shoulders. School is school, nothing special. Okay, but how are you doing? Come on, give me some details, Cammy pressed, staring at Faye intently. Well, there is this one guy, she confessed, her cheeks blushing. He's really cute and funny. He's in my math class. What's his name? I don't know. Never asked. I don't even talk to him. Why not? He's your type, isn't he? Cammy teased, winking suggestively. He probably doesn't even know I exist, she admitted, looking down at her hands in her lap. Do you talk to anyone at school? Her sister questioned seriously. No, not really. Faye, you need to get out. Make friends. You can't just spend all your time playing games. It's worked so far. She tried to think of how to explain it so her sister would understand. But Cammy was never a gamer. She could barely hold a controller the right way. Everyone at school is the same. They do the same things, eat the same things, and talk the same way. Even the wannabes and bottom dwellers on the social ladder. I'm not into that. I just want to go home and play my games. So, you're telling me that you don't talk to anyone? You eat lunch all by yourself? Kind of. I mean, there's a group of kids who eat down the other end of the table. I like to doodle in my notebook when I eat lunch, so I probably wouldn't talk to anyone I sat with anyways, she added. Faye, everyone needs someone to talk to. I have you. Yeah, only until I have to go back. It's not that I don't want friends. I'm just not into what they're into. Even when I try to say something, they usually ignore me like I'm invisible, so why bother? She sat back in her chair and crossed her arms as a flush of suppressed anger crept up her neck. Okay, I'll tell you what, Cammy said decisively. Clearly there's some issues going on at school that you're not too happy talking about. I was planning on hanging out with some friends, but I'll cancel and tell them I'll see them when I come back for Christmas break. You don't have to do that. Yeah, I do. You and I need more sister time. She smiled and pulled out her phone. Faye watched as she texted her friends just as their pizza arrived, courtesy of the cashier. She hadn't realized how ravenous she was until that moment. The crispy crust, gooey cheese, and mouth-watering pineapple hit her mouth with their delectable flavors, and she felt better almost instantly. Pineapple? Her sister joked. Who puts pineapple on their pizza? Faye smiled as a string of cheese hung from her bottom lip. I do. Faye folded her last slice in half and rubbed it around her plate to grab up the remaining crumbs before stuffing it into her mouth. Want another one? Cammy asked. With her mouth full, she shook her head. Ready? They stood up from the table and headed to the door. I remember the last time we came here. Cammy laughed as she spoke. You were so hungry. You ate 2 personal pizzas by yourself. Faye swallowed the chewed pizza as they headed out the door. You said you'd pay for anything I wanted to apologize for turning off my game. That was an accident. They approached the car when a female voice behind them called out Cammy's name. Faye didn't recognize the girl with long brown hair waving frantically at her sister, but by the way Cammy reacted, she knew it was one of her old friends. Heidi? Hey! She rushed over to Cammy and embraced her in a hug. I didn't know you were here. When did you get back? Faye hoped her sister noticed that she was ready to go by the way she edged toward the car. Instead, Cammy started to chat with Heidi about college. Faye pulled her portable gaming device from her pocket and turned it on. The game booted to her last save and she began to play. So how's college? Heidi asked Cammy. It's okay. I forgot, where is it, Texas A&M? Annoyed with Heidi's incessant giggling, Faye walked across the parking lot and across the street. She sat on the curb and refocused on her game, unaware of the sound of crushing leaves behind her. A car drove by slowly, and its bright headlights caused her to look up right before she felt strong arms wrap around her waist, yanking her away from the curb. She landed hard on her back. Her device tumbled across the grass, and within seconds, a dark, shadowy figure was on top of her. A hood partially covered her attacker's face except for red eyes that glowed in the obscured darkness. She felt his bony and cold fingers around her neck, and he placed his other hand over her mouth to silence her. It won't hurt. I need just a little, he spoke in a jagged and wretched voice. Faye felt her body growing weaker by the second. Her stomach twisted and knotted and her eyelids went heavy. Soon a cold chill overtook her, turning her entire body numb as if frostbite had just set in. Faye! Cammy called out from across the street. The attacker snapped his head in her direction before he stood and ran down the street. Faye! Faye! She saw her sister's face in a white haze. Faye, stay with me! Stay with me! Heidi is calling the police! Just stay with me! Besides a small concussion, your daughter is fine. We can keep her overnight to run a few tests if you want, just to make sure. Cammy sat by the edge of the hospital bed and she took Faye's hand into her own. I'm sorry, Faye. I should have been there. When the police and ambulance arrived, they were puzzled at the condition in which they found Faye. She was sitting up, fully conscious. She tried to tell them she was fine, but the paramedics insisted, and instead, they loaded her on a stretcher and into the ambulance, bound for the nearest emergency hospital. Are you sure, doctor? Her mother asked. She seems fine, Mrs. Cox. No bumps, no bruises. Faye sat up in bed. I'm okay. She tried to reassure her sister. I feel fine. But that wasn't the truth. She felt odd, different, and hungry. Her head throbbed in pain and she urged Cammy to turn off the lights in the room. Are you sure? She turned them off and headed back to Faye's side. Faye, I swear you stopped breathing. Heidi checked and said you didn't have a pulse. Stopped breathing? It sounded unbelievable, and she huffed until the image of her attacker popped back into her mind. She remembered the red eyes and his icy fingers, cold to the touch. She overheard the doctor speaking again, but this time he addressed her father. We were told that her body rejected whatever you gave her when she first came here. Now you're saying she's fine? Yes, the doctor answered. I know it sounds unbelievable, but all her vitals are normal. Mr. Cox, there are instances such as this that... No, check again, he said, adamant. We want her to stay overnight. The hospital was the last place Faye wanted to be. The room carried a stringent smell of hospital soap and bed linens, and the stench appeared to grow stronger. Cammy, I don't want to stay. What? Her sister asked. Mom and Dad want the doctor to keep me overnight. Cammy gave her a bewildered look. I just heard them. She stood up from the bed and walked over to the door. Faye, she looked back at her. How can you hear them? They're all the way at the end of the hall. Nothing satisfied Faye's enormous appetite. Not the baked chicken and mashed potatoes the nurse brought in for dinner, nor the pizza with pineapple, sausage, and onions that Cammy managed to sneak into the hospital. Nothing. No matter what she ate, she couldn't keep it down. Her hunger grew, and with that came waves of nausea and weakness. By midday, and with Cammy by her bedside, she fell asleep. A fresh and savory scent woke her from her sleep. She sat up and noticed Cammy sitting in a small chair in the corner, and only when Faye called to her she realized that she was still conked out. The scent intensified and drawn to it. Faye somehow knew that it was exactly what she needed and craved. The moment she climbed out of bed, she also realized that her vision seemed exceptionally sharp. Even with the lights out, she saw everything in her room in vivid detail. She let her nose be her guide, and in slow, baby steps, she began to walk as it took her in the direction of her sister. Standing over her, she felt a sundry desire to touch her sister's cheek. She reached, with her fingers spread out. "I wouldn't do that." A tall male with medium-length tawny brown dreadlocks stood in the doorway. "Are you the nurse?" Faye studied his unusual clothing, a blue shirt with a dark jacket and black jeans, which looked nothing like any nurse would wear. He was clean-shaven, and she saw his sharp cheekbones and ivory-white skin. "No, I'm Dusk," he introduced himself. "And you must be Faye Cox." "How do you know my name?" Her breath quickened. "It's on the whiteboard." He pointed to the wall to his right. Unbothered to look, she flashed him a fake smile. "I know what's happening to you," he said. "I know what it all means." "What are you talking about?" "I know why you're hungry," he said. His weird response did little to lighten her suspicious mood. "It won't stop until you get what you need," he continued. "And what you need puts your sister and your parents at risk. I don't know who you are and what you want, but you better leave before I scream for the nurse." The corner of his mouth yanked upward in a half-smile. "I'll go." He stepped back. "One more thing. When the smells become overwhelming, and they will, do not touch anyone and don't let anyone touch you." Faye reached out to her sister to wake her. She shook her hard, and when Cammy opened her eyes, Faye turned back to the door to find Dusk gone. Faye awoke to ruffling of her bedsheets. "You're pale, honey," her mother said as she placed a wool blanket over her. "Are you cold?" Right away, Faye felt the searing sun on her skin, and she pulled the blanket to cover half her face. "Mom, I'm fine. It's just bright in here." Her father stood at the foot of her bed and immediately walked to the window to close the blinds at the request from her mother. Faye looked around. "Where's Cammy?" "She went to get some coffee," her mother answered. "Faye, I don't know what we would have done if something bad happened. We were so worried when Cammy called." When she went to touch the side of her face, Dusk's warning repeated in Faye's thoughts. "I'm fine," she said as she quickly moved her head out of the way. When Cammy walked into the room, the scent returned. This time, it clogged Faye's nostrils, and she pulled on the blanket to tighten it. "Faye." A male doctor dressed in a gray polo shirt and gray slacks with a white coat knocked on the door. "I'm Dr. Armstrong. How do you feel today?" With the blanket still covering half her face, Faye sat up in bed and in a muffled voice replied, "I'm fine." "You are very lucky," he said as he approached the bed. "Lucky?" her mother protested. "The police told me that several people have been harmed in the past month around that area. She was almost killed." He backtracked, "And I'm sorry that this happened to her." "Is it true?" Faye asked. "I'm not for certain, but I have seen many patients just this past year who have been attacked in a similar way." "And what happened to them?" Dr. Armstrong ignored her question. "Besides a mild concussion, you're fine. It appears that after the attack you fainted. That would explain why you passed out." Faye just nodded her head. "I'm going to prescribe you an anti-nausea medication to help you eat. I'm sure the nausea is a leftover symptom of the emotional trauma. It will subside." "And what about her heart?" Cammy asked. "My friend said it stopped and that she didn't have a pulse." "We couldn't find anything to corroborate that," he replied, then turned to their parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Cox, may I speak with you for a moment?" They walked out of the room. "Faye, Heidi wouldn't lie," Cammy said. "But you heard the doctor. I'm fine." "No, something's wrong." Faye hushed her sister. "Shh. I want to know what he's telling them. She honed in and picked up on their conversation. When we drew her blood again this morning, we found something that wasn't there the night before, so I ordered another lab test just to be sure. Your daughter has excessive amounts of protoporphyrin in her blood cells. Mr. and Mrs. Cox, do you know if anyone in your family has suffered any symptoms from sun exposure? Not that we know of, her father replied while her mother placed her hand over her mouth in shock. What are they saying? Cammy asked in a whisper. I can't hear anything. Faye concentrated. He's asking Mom and Dad a question about our family. The doctor continued. Your daughter may have erythropoietic protoporphyria. It's a rare condition where the patient is sensitive to various types of light, including exposure to the sun. We would like to take another sample and send it off to another lab. Yes, her mother quickly agreed. Whatever you have to do. I'm sure it's nothing, he tried to assure them. But still, I'd like to be sure. When they arrived home, Faye went straight to her bedroom and pulled down the blinds. The sun appeared bright and only grew brighter on the drive. Exhausted, she climbed into bed and laid there alone, in the dark. Cammy was right. Something was wrong. Everything felt different. She was still hungry, but the turkey ham and cheese sandwich her mother offered her only made her nose curl in disgust. She was only able to tolerate a gulp of lemonade before she spat it out into the kitchen sink. Cammy offered to order pizza, and even that almost made her heave. Food didn't taste satisfying to her anymore. Great, I can't eat or drink anything, she grumbled inwardly. She fell into a deep sleep and dreamed of a million tiny creatures trying to devour her. It's been a 9 to 4, she explained into her headset, meaning that it had been an emergency, but that she was back in the game for the time being. Welcome back, Sylvina, Ral Hassaf greeted her. We've been fending off the Draxel beasts from the forest of Nimtuk. We could use your forestry skills. Just like that, Faye felt herself drawn back into the game, and she felt all right again. What kind of emergency? Argyle asked. The hospital kind. You were in the hospital? What happened? Ral Hassaf asked. Her stomach reeled. Nothing. Hey, there's a ghoul on the right, just behind that tree. You see it? Yeah, I got it. Besides the commingled noises of exploding lasers and dying ghouls, Faye heard another voice coming from downstairs. She pulled off her headset and overheard Cammy's voice speaking in a concerned tone to her father. Erythropoietic protoporphyria? According to the doctor, it's a rare condition. A rare genetic condition, her mother corrected. Genetic? Cammy repeated. It doesn't make sense, her father said. One day she's fine, and the next she's almost killed, and she has this rare genetic condition. Maybe all the lab tests were wrong. Mom, Dad, she is not okay. I don't think the doctor should have sent her home. She can't keep anything down. She's pale, and something is going on with her hearing. Something strange. Faye heard Argyle's screaming voice from her headset. Sylvina! There's one Draxel beast to our left! Faye slipped her headphones back on. I got it. She watched as the Draxel beast exploded and dissipated on the screen. Faye opened her eyes. She glanced at the clock on her bedstand, which read 12:05. It was midnight, and the appetizing scent returned, along with a searing pain on her right forearm. She rolled onto her side and tried to get up out of bed. Her legs barely supported her weight as she stumbled out of her room, down the hall, and to the bathroom. She turned on the light and noticed a dark mark that looked like dirt on her right forearm, and when she rubbed it, she groaned at the elevated pain. What's happening to me? She asked her own mirror image, looking back at her. A red skewed line materialized on her right cheek. It pulsed twice before another twisted line appeared, branching off and traveling up, only to stop directly beneath her eye. She blinked her eyes to wake up from this nightmare, but she saw something else, a flash of red, or so she thought. She backed away from the mirror, unable to decipher what now stared back at her. This thing had the same eyes as her attacker, but it was her. No, I'm dreaming, she attempted to coax herself into remaining calm. Faye, this is not happening, you're just tired. She remembered what her mother told her as a little girl, when she had bad nightmares. All she had to do was pinch her skin and she'd wake up, safe and sound. Faye pinched the top of her hand. Nothing. She pinched her side. Nothing. This wasn't a nightmare. She ran from the bathroom and down the stairs. Suddenly, the house felt like a prison, and the desire to run away as fast as she could drove her out the front door into the street. Barefoot and wearing only a nightgown with the words Battle Lands Brigade in bold black letters on the front, she walked down the street with no destination in sight. The cool night air calmed her nerves, and oddly enough, the pain on her forearm subsided. But the dark mark was still there, and when she looked at it again, it appeared a little bigger than before. Her feet had an instinctive mind of their own, and she let them guide her across the street. Another scent, this one of garbage, crept into her nose. Then there was the sweet scent of grass, followed by the foul odor of car fumes. She turned onto a main road and walked along it, shying away from the obnoxious glows from the streetlights. She could see every crevice in the sidewalks, every brick on each building around her, as clear as if it had been daylight. As she turned down a one-way street, she heard soft footsteps behind her. Faye paused for a second, and the footsteps behind her paused as well. When she continued walking, they too continued. As she came to the end of the street, she turned left and tried to break into a run. In her weakened state, however, she stumbled and fell onto the pavement, barely catching herself on her hands so that she didn't experience a full-on body collision with the concrete. "Faye." His voice sounded familiar. She stood up and spun around to face Dusk, and he wasn't alone. A woman wearing a red knee-high dress stood by his side. Her jet-black hair rested on her shoulders, and the ends of it lifted slightly in the breeze. "Honey," the woman said to Dusk, then took his hand. "She's so young." Faye backed away. "It's okay, sweetie. We won't hurt you," her soft voice reassured her. "I'm Salome, and you've already met Dusk. We can help you." Her arm. Dusk pointed at Faye's dark mark. She already has the dark splotch. Faye continued to back away. "Listen to me," Dusk said. "We know what's happening to you. We can help, but you have to come with us." "What do you want?" "Faye, you're different now," Dusk said. They both crept toward her, with Salome moving to the right and Dusk to the left, until Faye found herself backed up against the wall of a nearby building. Trapped, she tried to think of a way to escape, but every second that passed left her with only one option. She opened her mouth to scream, and he covered it with his right hand. "Don't do that," he commanded as his clear blue eyes gradually transformed into a dark crimson red. "We're just like you. See?" He then removed his hand. She squeezed her eyes shut. "Please just let me go home." "Look!" He grabbed her arm and held it up to her face. "Faye, look! Do you know what's happening to you? Open your eyes and look!" Forced to open her eyes, she looked again at the dark mark. "If you don't allow us to help you, this will keep happening," he explained. "It won't stop growing, and it'll cover your entire body." "And you will rot from the inside out," Salome added. "And then you will die." "We know you're scared. We know you're afraid. You don't have to be. We can help the pain go away. We can help you learn how to block out all the scents. We can help you manage." "Manage this?" Faye ripped her arm from his grasp. "I don't even know what this is!" He turned to Salome, and they exchanged a knowing glance. "You are a wraith, Faye," he finally revealed. She stared back at his red eyes in disbelief. "A wraith?" "And that mark on your arm is a warning sign. It means you need to leech, to feed." Faye didn't want to believe what he told her, but it was hard not to while gazing back at his red eyes. It couldn't possibly be true. "I have to get home." She attempted to walk away, but he grabbed her arm again. She couldn't fight against his iron-strong grip. "You go back and you're putting your entire family in danger." He then willingly released her. Overwhelmed with emotions, she muttered, I need to go home. I just want to go home." This time, Dusk didn't stop her as she stumbled down the street. When she reached the end of the block, she glanced back over her shoulder and saw that she was alone. Faye's vision blurred with fatigue. She realized she hadn't been paying attention to street signs, and that she was in the middle of a dimly lit street she had never been on before. She looked down the street one way, then the other, trying to remember which direction she had come from. "What are you doing, Faye?" she reprimanded herself aloud. "Lost?" sounded a voice, and Faye spotted a figure in the shadows leaning against a building. Salome and Dusk beckoned to her right, and a second male figure emerged from the shadows. "How?" Faye uttered in disbelief. The other male lifted a black cowboy hat from his head. "Her?" Curious, he pointed at Faye. "She's just a baby, barely wet behind the ears." "Tristan, not now," Salome said. "I'm just saying," he exclaimed, the faintest glimmer of a smile dancing at the corners of his lips. "What's going on, New Blood?" "You need to come with us," Dusk insisted again. "You can't go home." "Why in the world did that wraith turn her?" Tristan spoke out. "Must been an accident or something." "Doesn't matter now," Dusk answered. "But you said we had rules. We don't turn humans. We just take what we need and go on our way." "Apparently, this out-of-control wraith doesn't know the rules," Salome interjected. I guess. Either way, she's starting to rot," Tristan pointed out. "We need to take her now or she'll stink something fierce." Dusk held his hand out to her. "Faye, please." With no other options, she lowered her head in despair. "You can help me get better?" "Yes, don't worry." She slipped her hand into his own. "We're going to fix you right up, don't you worry," Salome agreed, patting Faye's arm with affection. "Tristan, would you be a dear and bring the van around?" Tristan pulled off onto a dirt road which wound its way behind a small forest to what looked like a 2-story dilapidated and abandoned farmhouse. It had a balloon frame with several tall windows on the lower floor and only a few on the top level. The steep roof had a large hole. "We're here." The van came to a screeching halt and he placed it in park. "Welcome to our lovely abode, New Blood." "Stop calling me that," Faye responded. "Oh, lighten up, New Blood," Tristan said again. Dusk hopped out of the van. To Faye, the place looked more haunted than anything. "This is where you live?" "It's not a 5-star hotel, but this place works out just fine for us," Tristan replied. "Darkness will have its day. Light will lead the way," Dusk uttered in the direction of a few slats of wood nailed together, which apparently served as the back door. "Come, Faye. I want you to meet the rest of the family." Nervous, she followed him. There was a rustling sound from within, followed by the slats of wood which moved to the side, allowing a single person to enter the house at a time. She entered after him, finding the interior dark. "We don't stay in one place often," he said, as they walked into what looked like a large room. Several crates were spread about, and a small lamp gave off the only light, revealing the sagging roof and Swiss cheese-holed walls. "Why?" she asked. "Because of what we are, sweetie," Salome answered. "We need to remain unknown. It's better for everybody." "Yeah, good thing we were in town when that wraith took you," Tristan joked. Near the back, Faye saw a teenage girl who looked a little older than her. Leaning against the wall, she spat on the ground and her eyes appeared flat while she wrinkled her nose. "Where'd you find this one?" "That's Maddie," Tristan pointed at the girl. "Don't mind her. She's a real—" "Shut up, Tristan," she barked. "Maddie, she is one of us now," Salome spoke. "Be kind to her. She's new and we all know what that's like." Her small speech was followed by Maddie's derisively laugh. "Dusk's always picking up orphans." She flicked her long golden brown hair behind her shoulder before she skulked off. Salome gently tugged on Faye's arm to follow her and Dusk to another room near the back. Another woman dressed in a t-shirt and jeans stood by the window. Her large hazelnut brown eyes ogled at Faye. "You found her," she smiled, creating pleasant creases in her smooth, dark skin. "Yeah, she was exactly where you said she'd be," Dusk replied. "Essie, this is Faye." Faye had a strange impulse when she looked at her, but she kept it in check, turning her attention to Dusk. "I can tell that you're wondering why I smell good," Essie said. "I'm human." "Essie is our friend and the only human we can trust. She helps us find safe places for us to stay. Have a seat, Faye," Dusk instructed her and pointed to a crate. She complied, and Dusk began. We are different from humans, as you may have noticed. We're called wraiths. We survive by leeching the essence of anyone we can find. But we only take a little here and a little there, Salome said as she stood next to Dusk. We have to be careful because if we take too much, then we end up turning our victim into what we are. We have rules, however. Some of us don't adhere to them, and when that happens, we take in someone like you. Maddie walked into the room and stood against the wall. The wraith who leeched on you took too much, Dusk continued with his explanation. He held on to you for too long, and in doing so, he killed you. I died? Her thoughts scrambled to understand what Dusk told her, and how her sister was adamant that her heart stopped. You'd think I'd remember dying? It happens quickly, he answered. But you did die, and now you must come to terms with it. That dark mark on your skin happens when you don't leech. You also grow hungrier, and the cravings become uncontrollable until you lash out. That's why you can't go home to your family, Faye. You will end up hurting them if you do. The safest thing you can do is to stay away from them. I can't go home? No, I'm sorry. We're your family now, Maddie said in a snarky tone. Welcome to our little merry band of nomads. Time felt as if slowed down all around her. Only days before, everything was normal. Her sister was back from college and she made a pact with her online friends to pick up the newest installment of Battlelands Brigade game coming out next week. I'm dead? Kinda. Well, not so dead, Maddie joked. Sunlight stings and makes us weaker, but it won't kill us, but that doesn't mean we aren't unkillable. But yeah, we die easier than you'd think for creatures like us, she commented again before Dusk silenced her with a hard stare. You'll get used to this life, Salome said, but you will need to leech. As her eyes moved to Essie, Faye saw a glimmer of hope and a resolution for the mark and the pain on her forearm. Essie approached her. Relax, Faye. She held out her arm. All you have to do is touch my skin, lightly, and allow my essence to flow into you. She swallowed hard. This doesn't seem real. She placed her head in her hands. I don't know. It's okay. Salome stood beside her. I'll guide you. Carefully, she held onto Faye's hand and laid it on Essie's arm. Now do exactly as I say. Once you make contact, your instincts will take over. Listen to them, but control them. If you don't, they will control you, and you will end up taking too much. You only need a little. It'll be enough to give you strength and to make the death splotch go away. Faye tried to ignore all the negative outcomes that bombarded her mind. What if I take too much? What if I can't do it? What if it doesn't work? But those thoughts all went away the moment she felt the warmth seep through her fingertips and into her skin. Her strength returned, along with her acute sense of hearing and smell. The pain in her forearm subsided and the dark mark filtered away until it completely disappeared. Now let go. Salome gently removed her hand. Essie's eyes drooped and Dusk knelt beside her. Did she take too much? She lazily shook her head. No. Essie licked her lips slowly. I just need to rest. She laid her body down on the floor and closed her eyes. Dusk stood up. Sometimes I think we demand too much from her. Although Essie looked peaceful, a heavy cloud hung over Faye. Is she going to be okay? She'll be fine. Salome grabbed a blanket and draped it over Essie. It's common for humans who we leech from to feel drained and tired. She just needs a few hours of rest is all. 5 minutes. Faye nodded before she opened the back door to the van and jumped out. Grab what you can carry and nothing more, Dusk said. And avoid your family. They can't see you. Thank you. She nodded, and with quick, light footsteps, she made her way to the side door of the garage. Her parents always kept it unlocked, just in case they lost her keys and needed a way to get in. She remained grateful that Dusk allowed her to go back home to grab her things. However, when she made it to the living room, she paused in thought. She wanted to memorize every detail about the house and the life she was leaving behind. She didn't want to forget every moment, good or bad, she had with her family. She crept up the stairs into her room. She grabbed her purple backpack from under her bed and turned it upside down, careful to empty its contents. A few notebooks, pens, pencils, and her school books fell to the bed. Seeing her math book reminded her of the assignments she promised Mr. Patterson, and now that she didn't have to do any more homework, it brought a wide smile to her face. Scanning the room, she spotted her handheld gaming device and shoved it into her bag. She searched her closet for her favorite pair of jeans and a few shirts. She looked down at her dirtied nightgown she still wore and quickly took it off, thinking that she had enough time to change into something better suited for her new life at the farmhouse. She expected and somewhat feared what came with this new life. Deep down, she understood and accepted that she was not the same Faye from before, and to protect the people she loved, she had to leave them behind. This thought devastated her, and the van tires screeched as Dusk slammed on the gas pedal. The vehicle jerked before it took off down the road, leaving a trail of thin white smoke. Faye turned back in her seat, watching as her sister ran out of the house and into the street. "Who's that?" Tristan, who sat in the last row next to a sleeping Essie, also looked back. "She's kinda hot." No one. Dusk kept his eyes on the road. In the front seat, Salome also turned around. "Faye, you understand why you had to leave them, don't you?" Faye drew her limbs closer to her body and squeezed her backpack against her chest. "They can't know that we exist. If one does, then we have to assume that they all do." "All humans except for Essie," Maddie, who sat next to Faye, spoke. "Essie is the exception." "How is she?" Salome questioned. Tristan poked at Essie. "She's still sleeping." Dusk turned the wheel sharply to the left. "They will come after us if they know." She doesn't, okay? Faye lashed out. I didn't tell her anything. Salome turned back to the front. We know, sweetie, we know. So where to now? Annoyed, Maddie exhaled. What other new random place are we going to call home for a day or two? Essie mentioned a town in Oregon, Dusk responded. Silver Falls. Sounds quaint, Salome commented. Maddie rolled her eyes. Sounds boring. Tristan leaned his head back. Well, wherever we go, I hope we stay longer there than we did here. The van took another hard left onto the freeway ramp. Faye looked over her shoulder one last time at the city she left behind. This has been The Not So Dead. Faye's story. Written by Isaiyan Morrison.